Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows can be found in podcast form. Visit ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Hit us up at dj@ArtistFirst.com. Here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And it is Michael and Margaret Lyons, and welcome to yet another show of The Soul of the Everyman.
Yep, we're here.
Where the points don't matter.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, that's the story I've been telling myself.
Oh, dear.
It's that the points don't matter. But I think the points do matter. And we make some good points.
Ah, I see what you did there.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, we are the stories that we tell ourselves, and that is our topic for this evening. And what do we mean by that? It's probably a good idea to do what we oftentimes we launch, and then you rein me back with like a club and say, we have to define our terms. So why don't we start out by defining our terms? What do we mean by the stories that we tell ourselves?
Well, it's very interesting. Because whenever you walk into a situation or an environment, you realize you have to try to comprehend what is going on around me. And it's just human nature. You walk into it and it's like, okay, what's going on? And it was always interesting to me because you can get 3 people in a room and they do an evaluation of what's going on, and if you listen to them, the story is always a little bit different from each and every person. And it all depends on what is most important to them, usually. They interpret everything through the eyes of what they feel is the most important detail or contact point with what's going on with the environment. So with the kids, let's say, our one child was very social. So he came into an environment and his first look at it was always, okay, there's somebody in charge here, or this is all going around someone. There's a nexus point. He would focus in on where the center of this is. Somebody else would come in, one of the other kids would come in and basically say, wow, look at that. That's interesting. You could actually do something with that. Or they're using it one way and you could alter it and do something else. And then the third one will come in and say, ooh, there's something to eat.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're not wrong at all. But I think my way of looking at the stories we tell ourselves is sort of like that, but it's usually based, well, I like your first point, which is that all of our stories are based on ourselves. We're telling the stories to ourselves about ourselves, generally speaking. We're kind of writing our own story. We're saying, well, how do I fit in? As you said, each different person wants to know how they fit into the situation. And they put their own spin on it, their own interpretation on it.
Well, I think the question that is answered is, how does this relate to me?
Exactly. And I like the relate to me. It also comes down to, you know, in any particular situation, everyone has their own viewpoint, you know. But if there's a precipitating event, you know, and I'll use the example, someone cuts you off in traffic. You know, you almost unconsciously assign motive, blame, make assumptions about how smart they are, how you know, careless or how inconsiderate they are. All the kind of, you know, stuff just flies out of your head and sometimes out of your mouth of a story about this particular event. and you have your villains, and you have your heroes, and you have your what could have happened, and it's a whole story, and every one of us does this, and that story almost invariably is incorrect, sometimes in small details, sometimes in incredibly large details. But yet, I think the important part about it is that we put ourselves in the center in all these situations, and we write a whole story in our heads. And then, like you said, let's say there's 3 people in the car. There's a driver, a passenger, and someone in the back who's really not paying attention. Everybody else, all of them will have a different story. Maybe the driver will have a story because they were the first one that noticed it, because they're driving. The passenger in the front might have a different story because they're, they feel perhaps threatened by all of the people in the car, including the driver. And the guy in the back, or the person in the back, might have just said, what, hey, something happened? It's just because completely, yet, the same event, based on your, I think to some extent, Margaret, based on how much it jolted you out of your kind of normal, like nothing's really happening kind of mode of, if it scared you, for argument's sake, you start to make a story of something that makes you angry or something that makes you scared.
Well, if you're required to respond to it in some way. Right. Driving, is that's pretty direct. You're all trying to maintain space, all going in a general direction, some faster than others. And you are required to evaluate what is going on around you, including the state of the drivers that you happen to be near, especially the ones that are near you. What are they doing? What are they driving? Are they aware of who's around them?
Right.
That is a very direct analogy to how most people interact with their environment, because they're all going in a direction. They all have a journey that they're following. They got to get to the end of their journey. It's like, I got to get there. All right, I got to keep an eye on what's going on around me. And if you're driving and you've got people in the car, it's like, well, you're responsible for whoever's in your car. So you are more in that mode of, okay, how is this journey going? The passengers, on the other hand, they can have any kind of conversation they want.
I agree with you. What I think starts our storytelling, or starts it in earnest, is some sort of event, something that kind of knocks you off of your. Let's just say that everybody is sort of constantly telling a story to themselves. Tolle talks about this, this constant internal voice, and he talks about that, and we'll not go there right now, because there's that in and of itself is a distraction from the now. But these stories that, again, we tell ourselves, we are always in the center of. It's, I want to do this and I want to do that. If you're really telling these stories to yourself, it's all about you. And sometimes you'll be telling stories about other people, again, assigning motives, blame, whether or not this person is doing it against you, for you, what you think about it, your opinion, this kind of constant drone. And that's one level of storytelling that we kind of engage in all the time. And then there's this precipitating event storytelling, where something happens, an event which startles us, shocks us, angers us, a spike of emotion comes up, and that sets us off into let's say a bit of a reactive mode. And part of that reactive mode is suddenly telling a story about it. And like I said, with the car, everyone can kind of relate to that, because you literally ascribe motive and intent to the person who startled you by cutting you off. You'll call them all kinds of names. You'll disparage their ancestry. You're in a combative fight or flight mode, and you're telling a whole story about them before you even realize it. And that's the kind of thing that we all do.
And it's an um, excellent area to begin to discipline yourself not to go into that mode.
Absolutely.
Because driving and having another car threaten you it's a physical survival response. You feel like this person is actually going to wind up hurting you in some way, shape, or form, or harming the other people in the car. But baseline is what is actually going on. That was always my question. What is actually going on? If the person has cut you off, there was something that precipitated that. So maybe you find out that, suddenly he got cut off, or there was something in the road.
Something in the road, exactly.
That he had to go around, et cetera, et cetera. It's just adding some kind of intention behind it, I find always colors what you're seeing.
Yes.
Because your internal is looking to see whether or not there's some malice there. Usually, when the events happen, unless you were like racing down the highway, the two of you, and that's when you know that there's a real battle going on. But otherwise, it's just like, okay, my prime purpose is to go from here to there without incident. I don't freaking care about anything else. I just want to make sure things are doing what they're supposed to do, so we can all travel together.
I think there's two really good points there, and the second one is what you said before. In essence, disciplining yourself, because what that second viewpoint that you just mentioned takes into account is maybe I'm not right about this person or these events, and let me refocus on what I really want to do, the real important thing, the actual thing that we're trying to do, get from point A to B safely, and that even though this event happened, there's at the moment of an event happening, there's a temptation to engage. You're almost like two particles, if you want to do the silly thing where they become entangled. If you become entangled with another driver, then you see these incidences of road rage, or like you said, people flying down the highway trying to race after each other. Because how many times have we seen, if you are a driver, one guy flies by, and then somebody down the pack there just says, "Well, man, I'm not going to let them go faster than me," and then you see them just dodging in and out of traffic like crazy. Usually two guys. Not to disparage my sex, but it's usually two guys, usually two young guys, because they engage, become entangled, and then the story that they're telling each other is that somehow this now matters more than life itself. I've got to catch this other car and prove to them I'm as fast as, or whatever it is. That whole story that you told yourself has now put you both in what was not a life and death situation now is really a life and death situation, and unfortunately many people end up having problems come from that. That writ large can be looked at in small situations. When somebody frustrates you, somebody does something, you go to the store and the checkout line's long and somebody's got 50 items in front of you and they start counting your change, and immediately you're telling a story about how dumb they are, and don't they realize I've got to do this, and why are they so, and if you go with that, you engage, you literally spin yourself up into a whole rage or a whole bitter kind of plug in all the bad people kind of things narrative about this person.
Well, it puts you into an exceedingly stressed state.
Indeed.
And your body basically is sitting there responding with all kinds of
stress hormones, cortisols, all the whole thing.
Right. Which is just it's not good. Not good in general. But that's the interesting thing. That story that you're telling yourself that engages you into this, this person is out to get me
Mm-hmm.
kind of mode. That stress mode is something, most people say, oh, I can't control that. They did this. You have to choose whether or not you're going to engage in that story.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is you don't know the whole story.
Exactly true.
And that's not something you want to remind yourself of.
Exactly true.
You just sit there, you want to be judge, jury, and executioner. And it's like, but why? That's always my question. Why are you going down this road? Because you're making not only stress hormones for yourself and your whole body and all the other things that come along with it, but everybody else that's around you has got to suffer along with you at the same time.
Right. The thing right there in the middle of your statement, which is, I think, the key point is why. Why do we trust ourselves? Why when we go into this mode, do we trust ourselves that the story we're telling ourselves is the absolute gospel truth, that these people are out to get us, that we've got to now react as though they are and play this whole thing out, working ourselves into a frenzy or a rage or fear or whatever it is, based on what is probably, not maybe, probably, almost certainly not the truth, because we have a very limited, sometimes almost an infinitesimal amount of information about that other person. All we've done is they were there, complete strangers, and we were all going along doing nothing, and then something triggers us. Bam! We don't even know what it is. We go from doing nothing to suddenly telling this whole story about what happened and why it's against me, or why it's affecting me, and how I'm going to feel about it. And like you said, rolling into emotion. Everyone around us has to now deal with it. If you really act it out, then you start yelling, screaming, acting annoyed, banging things around. You see people do this. What are probably perfectly normal, sane people under most situations. You get them stressed out, and they start acting like petulant 2-year-olds, kicking things and making big big bad faces and making noise and you, if you're an observer of the whole situation, not being involved, not triggered, you almost have to laugh. So this guy, this guy's completely lost it. So in these situations, why do we? The first question is, why do we trust ourselves? Why do we take that tiny little bit of information and tell the story and believe it, almost without question? And then why? And the second point you said is why do we then hold to that regardless of all new facts? Like then you'll see something else which might mitigate the situation, or might change, should have changed your perception. Who knows what? This person's deaf. This person actually has a problem. Whatever it is. But you hold it. Well, but I'm still right. You hold very, very tightly to your initial assessment. It becomes and sort of an ego. I think an I thing. I can't be wrong. I've got to be right about this,
It's the I know.
It's the I know, and the I'm invested. My pride's on the line now.
Yeah, it's completely an ego thing. It's whenever something's happened, whenever it happens, it's always taken personally, which is the weirdest thing to me, especially when you're on the road. It's taken personally. And I look at that and I go, but you're not really the most efficient or safe driver at this point. You're actually endangering yourself and others.
Yes.
So what's more important then? It's not the safety of everybody around you. It's not even your own safety. It's your pride?
And aren't you becoming what you just reacted to?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody flies, we go back to the highway for a sec. Somebody flies by you, cuts you off, blows the horn, and tears away. and you go from just driving along, being a normal person, to blowing your horn, tearing off after them, cutting off other people. Now you've become exactly what you said the other person was. You've become a jerk on the road, driving dangerously, causing problems. It's the story you told yourself about how horrible this person is, and your investment in being right, and your ego makes you into almost the person that you've the story that you're telling. You're now that guy that's tearing down the highway, causing problems.
Well, it's a useless expression of energy as far as I'm concerned.
It is.
And usually, I sit there and I go, well, weren't you ever taught that old trick of count to 10? Can you count to 10 calmly when all this is going on? I mean, as long as you're not involved in an accident.
Well, explain it. I mean, you say the old trick, but I think it needs some explanation anymore. What does it mean if somebody blows by you? What does count to 10 mean? Really, literally?
Just when you feel like you're rising into either an anger or something unpleasant, an unpleasant emotion is going to engage you. You count to 10 out loud. And doing that settles the body down, brings it back from that brink of reaction. And then once you do that, and counting to 10 also means that you're taking a deep breath at the same time, usually. And you let that out. You let the tension go. Then look at it and evaluate it. Is it really worth your time, your energy, your effort to go after this person?
And it's amazing. The mechanism you just described is like a circuit breaker, in my opinion, being an engineer. So something triggers, something happens, some event, bam, and your body and your emotion is so quick. It really literally reacts within 20 or 30 milliseconds, a very, very short fraction of time. It reacts. It gets you prepared for action. And before you know it, you're angry, and you don't even know why. And then the storytelling starts after, much later in the reaction, you start telling the story. But the story is still a precursor to the actual actions you're going to take. You have the event, the reaction. You almost can't stop those two things. The event and reaction are hardwired into your body, because over millions of years we had to survive in a hostile world. So events and reactions were really important. Reflexes are quick because you need them to be quick. The story is sort of the extra. It's the ego. It's the, now we're going to do this because they did that and they deserve it kind of stuff. And then the thing is the action, the actual thing that you do. The circuit breaker is what you just described, which is that you're already mad, you're already triggered, you're already telling the story, but then you start to count to 10. And during that count to 10, which is a reversion to, school days or something, you're now doing something which your mind knows how to do and your body knows how to do, which is, it takes nothing except gives you time to breathe, to not think about what you're thinking about because you're counting, and you get to the end and you go, okay. It's kind of pushed the ego away from action reaction to action, take a breath, swear a little bit, call them idiots, but then don't engage, don't become what they're wanting you to become, which is fight or chase or scream, yell, rant, and rave. That's the discipline part that's missing.
Well, counting to 10 out loud You're engaging your voice box, your mouth, and it interrupts the thought process immediately. As well as you might still have that residual emotion, but now it's like I'm just counting numbers. I'm going to breathe, and it literally brings down the almost the heat of the moment.
The heat is a great way to put it.
Because the emotions just charge you up. So you're bringing it down to 10, and then you can look at it and go, okay, what just happened?
Right.
And is it worth, X, Y, or Z? So do I need to follow through with this response, or, what is your purpose in this moment? What was your focus? Where do you need to be?
Right. It gets you, I think what it does is it gets you back on your original track. Your original track was, we're going to somewhere. We're going to the store.
Well, it's just you realize that person's not worth it. It's not worth it's not worth your breath.
Right.
Not worth your time.
Right. And it also, I think, provides, maybe counting to 10 is simplistic, but it provides a break. It's something which you can, it doesn't take a lot of discipline to just say, something happens, count to 10. It's very simple, but it gives you a space. It gives you a something to do when you don't know what to do. Because part of a reaction is you don't know what to do. You're just all charged up. And then if you allow the pathways, which can get burned in your brain over time, of action where you're screaming, yelling, ranting, raving, throwing things, chewing holes in the rug, well, if that becomes your preferred pathway, then you never have a chance to stop it. You go from trigger to screaming with no in between. And all this is saying is you go from trigger and you just put in one little circuit breaker, count to 10. And during that time, 10, 15 seconds at the most, you're not doing anything else. You're not screaming. You may clench your teeth and count to 10, but you're not screaming, yelling, ranting, and raving. You're going, I'm going to count to 10. And you get to the end of that, and you may still feel angry, or you may still feel crazy or afraid or whatever it is, but you've broken a chain, like a chain reaction. You've broken a chain. And in breaking that chain, you've dissipated some of that energy, and you've called it back. You've gathered it back to yourself.
Right. You're not dissipating your energy. Usually you can't afford to dissipate your own personal energy. It's too exhausting.
Well, I think I know what you mean. But you mean like discharging it, like you charge up all this emotion and you flash it out towards someone or something.
Right. And the emotions that rise, it's not discounting the emotions.
No.
But the emotions that rise bring a certain charge with it that you're supposed to use to solve the problem. But most people just throw it into anger instead of focusing it into productive channels.
Yeah, I think the count to 10 can at least give you the opportunity to focus it. But you know what? Let's count to 10. Let's take a little break, go back to the studio. We'll tell ourselves a little story, and then when we come back, we'll talk more about trust.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side, as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is Book 1 of the Adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhummusic.com. And you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Thank you.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Brag Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on ArtistFirst World Radio. Back to your hosts, Margaret and Michael Lynes.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, we are back, and we are talking about the stories that we tell ourselves.
And we trust Margaret implicitly.
Oh, Lordy.
I do.
Okay.
But we do. I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. We've talked about the stories and where we tell them to ourselves, and we all do. But we trust ourselves, I think, far. Why do we trust ourselves so implicitly? That's really the question.
It has a lot to do with our own perception of what we think our world is and how we operate in it. I mean, when you think you know, and most people want to know because they basically want to be able to control their world.
Yes.
So you look at that and you go, well, I know this happens, and I know that happens, and in this situation it does this. And usually, especially when you're a small child, that's what you strive for. It's like, okay, this is how I walk. This is how I'm supposed to walk on on a regular floor. Oh, this is how I walk in mud. This is how I walk in, you're learning, you're just learning. But the implicitness of it, see, that's the as you get older, there's certain things you sort of put in your knowledge bank. You're sitting there going, yeah, I know how to do this. Oh, yeah, I know how to do that. We don't like it when something happens and it's different from what you feel you know.
You're right, and I think there's the other part of it, I would say, is that once you think you know, I think you said this many times, is when you hear the "I know," you already realize that the person you're talking to is really saying, "Don't tell me anymore." I'm not going to listen anymore. I know. So this is in conversation. I think when you're telling yourself a story, there's this implicit, the story I'm telling myself is the absolute God's truth because I know what's going on. And then it's facts be damned after that point. Whether or not you can find out anything later is all in how much charge you've put into the I know. It rejects all other hypotheses. And in my opinion, it's sort of an arrogant, it's an arrogant thing to trust yourself so implicitly about things that you can't possibly actually have gathered enough information to know what's really going on. Mm-hmm. The ego, and whenever you talk about the I and the I know, the ego isn't far behind. It's just sitting right there going, yep, those are my boys, the I and the I know. Because the ego gets involved in the story. It gets invested. It becomes if I'm wrong, it means I'm wrong, I'm bad, that I did something bad. So I can never be wrong, because that would mean I'm bad. Where do bad ideas come from? They come from other people. That's where they come from. All my ideas are good ideas, and all bad ideas come from other people because that's where bad ideas come from. That's the ego's story to itself.
True. When you think of it that way, every story that it tells itself then is a foundation of a truth for that ego.
Right.
So it's rather interesting because it's a thought pattern that you're basically setting up around you. And you're operating strictly on this thought pattern. Or, this is your reality bubble.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, your reality bubble is you've designated specifically as a thought patterning. You're only interacting with the world through this, what you feel you know. It's the I know as your filter.
As your default filter. So that when things happen, you have all your shortcuts ready to go. And those shortcuts are all the absolute truth. So when something...
Yeah, that's interesting, though, because that means that those shortcuts, and people, maybe that's the reason why you do this immediate, as you call it, trust in the story, because it's a shortcut for you to deal with your outward reality.
Yep.
The brain is always looking for a way to do a shortcut. It's like, oh, yeah. If you even studied the way your eyes take in information, and then your brain tells the rest of you a story according to the scatter pattern that it actually picked up, went through its eyes.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's, again, fundamental reality is we're making it up as we go along. And that's a foundational power of the brain, because otherwise it can't understand reality. Reality there's too much reality going on to understand it, so the brain needs shortcuts. And that's for visual processing and all the kinds of things that you do, those basic level things. But then we bring that same mechanism up into these interaction points, so that it becomes a shortcut to say, if this happens, it must mean that this person has these feelings, and they're motivated by this, and they're going to do this next, and I'm going to say that, and it just goes down the ladder, because all that shortcut takes no thought. If you figured it all, you quote unquote figured it all out beforehand, and you go right from something happens and it says, you always do the same thing and it means this, and you can hear it. It's just a litany. It's a pulse of the shortcut working its way all the way down through your body and out your mouth. You know?
Well, it's just, I find it fascinating because doing that, saying that, okay, this is the short, I know how this is going to go, so I make this shortcut.
Right.
And there's never a correction. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You make no room for the fact that the only thing that is constant is change.
Right.
So the situation changes constantly, but you've made no provision in your thinking, in your feeling, and how your reality bubble is going to move through the world. And it's so rigid that when you've got a rigid structure like that, the only thing that happens is shattering, because it's too brittle. You can't take the truth of the vastness of what's around you.
And I think, to be fair, in the moment of reaction, we trust ourselves implicitly. But then a lot of people will have the after. Oh, maybe I was too quick. Maybe they had something going on. And so you will kind of call yourself back. I mean, we have to be fair with ourselves. We're not all automatons. But if you can learn to do that in the moment, in other words, don't trust. I've heard this said before. Don't trust your first reaction. Your first reaction to a situation should be to stop, count to 10, give yourself the break, give yourself a moment to realize that maybe you shouldn't act on very little or almost no information. So maybe you learn that, and maybe if you start to discipline yourself, you get there. But if you don't, you have the regrets, the after. Oh, I see. And sometimes you can't call it back. You've said things in anger. You've said things in fear. You've done things which are irretrievable, irredeemable, or at least they have caused damage which now has to be repaired. So as they say, one word said in anger can ruin a relationship. One word said in anger can cause years of recriminations.
Well, with the society we have now, especially with social media, that whatever you put out there is there forever.
Yes.
And you would think that it would make people more cautious.
You would think,
you
but
would
it doesn't.
You would think, because it's going to come back. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. It's still there. And it can never be erased.
That is such a great point. And you know what? Maybe it is, Mark. Is maybe we haven't internally processed it yet as a society. But it used to be you could say something and it would, and unless you were right in the room and you heard the person say it, maybe you would say, well, maybe that didn't happen. But now it's forever, and everything you do. And I think that we'll probably learn this. Maybe the kids will learn this. Is that you can't do anything in private anymore. In other words, anything you do is basically writ large for the world to see. So therefore, kind of be on your best behavior all the time. Now, we haven't done that. We do as though we're not being watched. I hesitate to say it, but it's like, the same analogy that would say, well, at the end of your life, you get a life review and you get through everything. Someone's actually been watching and taking down everything you've ever done, and you go through the whole thing. Well, in a weird way, this living breathing thing we call the internet is writing down everything, at least the portion that it gets, and it's there forever. So you can never live it down. 20 years from now, something stupid that you did in 3 seconds becomes, the defining moment of your life, which is crazy. But that's what happens to people.
Early life review.
Yeah.
But when you think of that, though, it's can you actually live with that concept, that knowing that your words are forever?
Yeah.
Because if you really thought about it, you would be afraid to even open your mouth about anything.
Gives you some pause. This is a whole different show. We shouldn't go down this far. We might have to come back to this. But the words are forever. We must remember that. We'll remember it because it will be
all right.
But let's move back. So this instinct we have to trust ourselves, to trust the stories that we tell ourselves. I think there's the component of it that I'd like to bring up is that implicitly we give ourselves credence over all others. In other words, like I said, bad opinions come from others. All the things we feel are real and near and true, independent of the actual reality. So there's a bubble. Call it, you're in your own ego bubble. If you live within that, everything, you mentioned it before, everything is filtered through the ego bubble. Now, if you get outside of it and you realize that the ego is a very small portion of you and that you are a vast being, that you live in an endless now, that you are present in that endless now, and the ego lives in the future, it lives in the past, it lives in its own bubble. You understand that this is a small thing. You become egoless. You become you give yourself the perspective of not being tied to this reactive state of everything that comes in requires me to get moved into this direction, moved into that direction. But if you don't do that, if you stay down there in the ego bubble, it's an echo chamber. So the story that you tell yourself is an echo of the ego talking to the ego. So of course you trust yourself. It's me, myself, and I in here, and I'm just talking to me, and everything I say is the God's honest truth because there's no one else in here.
That's right. It's a very lonely state to be in.
It's lonely, but it's really like it's a real small club. It's just me.
You can't share anything from that.
No.
There's nothing to share then. It's just you. This is the world. There's no one to share it with. It's just you.
Yes, it's the ultimate narcissism.
Right. And that's amazingly lonely.
It is, I think, but that's where it comes from, this kernel of trusting these stories, of saying that what I think is so much more weighty and important than what anyone else thinks, it can become a toxic sort of like cycle. It's cycle is not exactly the right word, but it becomes I think maybe echo chamber is the best. It feeds upon itself. It's a standing wave. It's not. It lets nothing else in but its own little opinion.
Yeah, but you don't grow. There's no energy.
No.
You basically feed on yourself until there's nothing left.
Yeah.
There's no life there. It's just a slow march to death.
I think these bubbles, which could also be little shortcuts, they're hanging around, waiting to be triggered, and then it's a whole set piece. All the little stories that come inside this one particular bubble that gets triggered. This always does this, and they always do that, and they're always out to get me, and da da da. It's all absolutes. There's no room for any nuance. It's always this happens, and this is going to happen, and this happens next, and now this happens, then that happens, and
It's interesting to me because it's again that I know energy, and
Yes.
and it's a distinct energy.
Yes.
When you look at I know, there is no opening for an I know energy. It is a closed system, and every time you engage in the I know, you have to use the energy that you have in that moment to unpack that I know pattern.
Mm-hmm. You almost infuse it with your life force.
Yes, it's almost like you plug it in.
Yeah.
And it's plugged into you because it's going to feed off of you in that moment. Yeah. And then you go into this reactive, predictable patterning. It's usually, after a moment like that, you're completely exhausted.
Isn't that the truth, the absolute truth? You're like a battery that this bubble plugs into, sucks in whatever amount of power it can, burns it off, so it gives you back nothing. It just flashes it out into the ether, and then goes dark again, and you're exhausted. You feel, after this episode, drained.
Well, if you look at it in terms of you being a battery, then this is a frequency of light. This particular light bulb has this shade of color to it.
Yep.
So it gets plugged in and it radiates out and uses up energy in the battery.
Right.
And then it gets unplugged and you're drained, but it got to shine for that moment. Instead of being able to come to a system which is not self-contained. In other words, you are reacting with your environment. There's energy all around you. Maybe that's the best way to put it. When you're in that I know state, you become a battery. You are not connected to the outside world in a living and breathing form.
Right.
You are isolated as a single battery unit or a capacitor. Then you get discharged.
Yeah. Yes.
Then you have to recharge up somehow. I think capacitor is a better thing because a battery, basically says it's like a source point, but a capacitor is just, you only fill it up to a certain bit.
It's absolutely truth. Another way to put this, and people have said this before, and I think we talked about it once or twice, is that these things are little bombs. They're little things that you set off, but they don't have in and of themselves any energy. They take yours and explode it outward. So this shortcut bubble of something happens, the I know, the ego instantly finds the bubble or bubbles that it wants to plug into it. It infuses them with energy and it explodes outward, and it's gone. It literally drains your life force. And it usually throws the life force into the future or into the past, in the sense of if it's all about what's going to happen, and this always happens, and this
projects,
this.
You mean?
It projects, exactly.
It projects in a direction, not necessarily into the future, but it's projecting an image.
Right. You don't move forward. You literally project all of your energy into what could be, or into regrets.
Maybe what these shortcuts become are little holographic slivers. And the hologram doesn't come alive unless there's light.
Oh, you're just full of great analogies tonight. Go ahead, that's a good one.
Well, it's just that these patterns that get set up when you're in a situation and you get triggered calls up this hologram of a pattern. And the minute that you put your own light into it, it becomes alive.
It becomes your phony reality.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's such a great analogy.
And just to understand that this is a hologram. It's a 3D image that you created, and you are projecting with your own life force.
That is so good, because in essence, it's more than just an image. It's a movie. It's
your story.
It's your
is your
story.
shortcut story. Your shortcut story was created into this hologram. And then you file it away somewhere and you bring it out when the situation arises. You get triggered.
Triggers. So let's go back to the last half hour when we were talking about the 10 seconds. The 10 seconds is stopping the energy from zapping it, or like the hologram comes alive, it flickers to life, and it's there. And it wants to suck as much as it can. And that 10 seconds just says, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. You just sit right there. I'm going to starve you for a period of time. I'm going to sit back and say, no, I'm not going to give you my energy. I'm going to keep it with me. I'm going to give myself that 10, whatever it is. You give yourself a break. And then you say, no, you can go back to sleep. You can go away. I'm not going to go there, right?
I'm not going there.
I'm not going to go there. Isn't that the phrase we use, right?
Yeah, I'm not going there.
I'm not going there.
If we look at the hologram as this is your bubble of reality, and the bubble of reality turns out to be what you actually put on to yourself.
Ooh, even better. Gosh, this is like, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this. Go ahead.
Well, okay. You've got these shortcuts and you create this pattern.
Yep.
And this pattern is like a bubble form that become animated. It needs the flame of your consciousness or life to light it up to make the hologram look real. And you literally have to put it over your life force for it to be able to be enacted all around you. That's where your reality bubble begins to do the interaction, because now it's feeding off the life force that you are, reenacting all those patterns and interacting with the outside world that way. But it's feeding directly off of your light. You yourself are not connected to the moment, to the here and now, where your consciousness is actually in alignment and part of the greater flow of energy. You've isolated yourself to be that little battery or capacitor, and this thing comes over and is enacted. So when you do the 10 seconds, what's happening is before this thing descends on you,
yes,
to engage, to react into these old patterns, you're sitting there going, no, wait a minute, I'm going to go through my 10 seconds. And you go, do I really want to put that on? Because I'm going to be exhausted. Not only that, I don't want to feel that way.
Well, and I like that because I think that every time you put it on, it becomes more comfortable, more familiar, and there's some damage. You know, your mind is a plastic thing. People for many years thought the mind was sort of a static environment, the neurons. The mind is incredibly plastic. So the more you put this on, this bubble, the more you warp yourself to make it more comfortable, more familiar, and it can become your habitual state. It can take you into a habitual state of whatever, constantly being triggered. We all know people who their habitual state is, I'm angry all the time. Well, they've got the anger suit on, the anger bubble on all the time. We don't want to do that. We don't want to trust every story that comes into our lives and that we make up. We want to give ourselves that time, that fuse, that break. And I think right now we're going to have to take a break. So we're at the end of the Soul of the Everyman. I hope this has been enjoyable. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.